Welcome to the May 5th, 2022 Library Trustees meeting, also known as Mark's last Library Trustee meeting. So why don't we dive right in? We have no in-person public participation. No one logged in yet?
No.
Okay. Any correspondence?
No.
None. Approval of minutes for April 7th. Anyone see anything that needs to be amended?
I have under director's report, Sam Alvarez, that Cheryl's leaving on 4/11. She's actually leaving at 5.
Cheryl retires next week. You will miss her. You not have any? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Guess it's talk louder.
I do think we might need to talk louder for the
Sorry.
for the audio part anyway. Okay, treasurer's report.
That goes fast. Okay. Yes. Okay. The gift amount is $6,406.84. The building fund account has $981,712.08. And the grant account has $4,689,547.88.
Any questions?
So I have been talking with Sean O'Brien, the treasurer. Once the last payment for the grant is received, which should probably be in July or sometime after July, the building account and the grant money will be taken to pay off the bonds or the bands, I guess they're called. And the rest of the library has been bonded already.
So how does that work with the remaining pledges to come?
I do not know. So there's a couple things that someone needs to talk to Sean about. One is that 900, you said 989. So that's actually $89,000 more than we promised to raise because they already took 100,000 out along. When we did the design phase, they took 100,000, and we promised $1 million. So we should someone needs to talk to Sean and Alicia to figure out, where the money in excess of $1 million we raised is being allocated to. So the building project is going to come in slightly more than the town allocated. So that money should at least be used first there rather than actually coming to the trustees for trust funds to cover the difference.
Say that again.
The town allocated 14.6 for the building. The building is coming in right now, the guess is somewhere just under 14.7. So the trustees, if you remember, we voted to spend up to $400,000 out of trust funds, but we have raised over $100,000 more than we said we would. So that 100,000 probably should come before we have to do the trust funds.
Okay, so fundraising before.
Yes, but that needs to be confirmed with Sean and Alicia that they agree to do that. And also the solar panels, if it has to come out of that money or the lead grant, which I think they said it's coming out of the lead grant, but there's going to be extra in the lead grant once it actually comes in from more than the solar panels cost. The combination of the earmark and the lead grant is more than the solar panels. So I don't know what happens to that, the rest of that one.
Because I can schedule a meeting for us to be in. What's the timing that the money's gonna go to pay for the bonds?
Somewhere after the grant, the 5th grant payment comes in, which will not be before July 1st.
Okay.
So it's got to be in the next fiscal year.
Okay.
And I can help with that too. if you need.
I think it would be helpful for you to help with that, given you're part of that whole history. Okay. Anything else on the treasurer's report?
No. Oh, I guess just that we got the BART fund and it reflects the amounts that we asked them to take out.
The 26,000 and the 15,000?
Yes.
So they did remove the money, yes.
Yes.
Great. Friends report.
Okay. The book sale is a big success. I have the preliminary numbers on what they made. $531 from the bake sale. $600 in memberships. And then the book sales were $3,351. So almost $4,500 total for what they made over the weekend, which is more than they have made previous years. So that, I think everybody was very happy with that. I wasn't able to go because we were away, but I helped set up and there were a ton of books, just so many books. So hopefully many of them got bought, and I don't know how many were left over or what happened, if they all got taken away. But maybe somebody else knows what happened.
So I can tell you, I was at the book sale quite a few days. It was always very crowded. I mean, there were a lot of people all of the time. So it was very popular. More Than Words came to grab the first shipment of books Tuesday, and I think they're coming back this coming Tuesday to grab the rest of them.
Are there more in the trailer for next time?
I
Empty.
think the plan is to empty the trailer,
Empty.
but I'm not 100% positive.
I held back some books, but the majority of them are really, books to empty the trailer and just keep books that might be useful upstairs.
Yeah, the shelves upstairs look pretty bare right now.
So they were bringing books from upstairs, downstairs to sell so that they'd have more room for donations to upstairs.
Great.
And I know they're working on getting an organization system for the donations.
So that was a big success. The transfer station finished up last weekend, so the end of the month, and we're still returning bottles. So far, we've gotten a little over $400, I guess, but Janice still has many bags in the garage that need to be redeemed. So in the next few weeks, there will be more redemptions on those. So they had discussed whether they want to continue the transfer station going forward, and we'll
Whether
see.
time worth.
Is it worth the time and effort? And maybe since the upstairs book room was doing so well, with less time and effort, I think, then they will discuss for the future if they are going to continue with the transfer station once they see how this month goes. The coffee cart is coming back, so they're working on getting that up and running and ordering supplies for that. They approved funding for a new museum pass, Historic New England, which has a lot of historic homes that you can visit through that pass. They discussed how to expand and attract new members. And so one idea which clearly worked was to put flyers out at the book sale, so that was a success, possibly with the summer reading packets, to put some sort of paper in with all the stuff they get, because many young parents might not know that the Friends even exist, so give it, and then
A good idea.
yeah, and then possibly display it, or have a display. I think there already is one in the book sale room, and then maybe on the TV screens. And then they're still working on an appreciation event for the staff. But then it is in the works.
Are they doing the yard sale maps again this year, or they haven't decided that?
I did not hear anything about that. Any questions?
They've been busy.
A good plan would probably not to be holding the book sale in the same month as the transfer station.
Yes.
I don't understand what the conflict is currently.
When Janice is off collecting cans at the end of the month on Saturday, at the same time, everyone's trying to help at the book sale. Yeah, it's,
I have to say, I walked in, you guys were having boxes of books donated, dropped off, and I walked in, there was a mountain in the middle of the starts room, and I was like, oh no. That's a lot of books. It looked great.
I would like to call out the National Honor Society kids that volunteered. They
Yes.
were awesome. They were here.
They
Quite a
were
bit.
hard workers when I was
They
here.
were here at least 3 or 4 days helping, and the cleanup on Saturday went much smoother than I was expecting it to go. It's smoother than it's normally been, and thanks to Andy volunteering as well, and the National Honor Society kids for their help.
That is such, they're so good. Like, it's really awesome when you get volunteers who just do things, move. You don't have to really be told. So really grateful for them.
I'm looking at the treasurer's report, sorry. Something you asked me made me think. They did transfer the two amounts of 13,100. The other amount wasn't 15,000, that's for FY 2023. It was 4,000 that we asked for. And we did that. Just to-
So when are they calling the 16 that we got there? So we just
We
had
didn't say a
authorized,
time
we didn't
or-
give them a time yet.
Right.
The new start time.
So typically,
Is it January?
and it doesn't have to be this way, but historically, they pull the 15,000 for materials in June.
Okay, so it does not yet reflect the 15,000.
There's no reason they couldn't pull it July 1st. Effectively, it would make more sense to pull it after
The
July
fiscal
1st,
year.
when the new fiscal year, but they historically pull it January 1st.
Do they tell us before they do?
So in the past, in the recent past, they have asked which funds you want the money pulled from. So you can continue doing that or tell them to take it proportionally from, I would say to take it proportionally from those funds that are dedicated to materials.
So I think we did that. I think that's part of what we voted on last time.
We gave them the numbers.
101 through 203.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll check, just find out if they can just give us a heads up when it's gonna happen.
Yep.
I'm done now, sorry.
That's okay.
And I'm done too.
Okay. I'm holding the spot for later. We'll hold on. Building updates.
So we had the walkthrough 2 weeks
Right.
ago.
Something like that, yeah.
Two-ish weeks ago.
April 5th, or middle of April.
Middle of April, we had the walkthrough with Commodore, the OPM, and the architect to go through the punch list.
Yeah.
I don't remember what was left of years old, but it seemed like things were moving pretty well. And the plan is to close out the Commodore portion of the work. It's closed out, or it's going to be closed out very soon, which will be finalizing the building project number, or almost all the building project number. There were still a few little things to be done, but I don't think they were at additional costs, or most of them weren't. We also walked through with Cataldo was here to talk about potentially additional seating, or so the hillside over by the patio is wildflowers. That's just going to take a while to grow in. I'll come back to that in a second. The others are grass. They talked about potentially overseeding them again, and we're going to give this a quote. I don't know if they did that yet, and I don't know if that's going to happen or not. someone can follow with Brian on that. The wildflowers, there's a couple things going on over there. So they're gonna take a while to grow just because of their nature.
Wildflower fields take like 3 to 5 years to fully establish. So this will be a process we are with
Right.
for a while.
Right. So one suggestion that, well, I don't know, Katrina and I were talking about getting some campaign style signs that say, you know, wildflower meadow in process or progress, or, you know, please keep all. I don't know what the wording is you want on them, but some signs along that line. I got one quote for them, 10 signs would cost $200. Printed locally, I asked for another quote as well that I haven't received yet. So that's one piece. The other piece that I've been working on is if you come here in the afternoon, you see the kids walking up from the school through the wildflowers. Since I don't think we're ever going to stop them from doing that, the suggestion is let's make a mulch path.
Let's embrace the fact that they're
Yes.
creating a cow path for us.
Right.
Well, they're creating a cow path.
They're
Let's-
creating multiple of them at this point.
Yes, right now they're creating multiples of them, so let's figure out exactly where they're walking and put down, you know, a foot,
A walk
2
here
foot of mulch wide down, and that will encourage them at least to stay in a common area.
Great idea.
I have talked to Joe Cataldo, who will donate the mulch for it. He will come out and talk to us, see where the path should be, and he'll donate the mulch. We have to donate the labor to put it in. So that is in the works.
Thank you for talking.
So Joe will meet with us in the next couple of weeks to figure out, you know, how to do that and how to get mulch. So, and then there'll be a call for people with wheelbarrows and shovels and rakes to put it in. I think it's.
Are we gonna get a wheelbarrow up with that?
Well, yeah.
Might be buckets.
There's gonna have to be a plan on how to do it, so.
For the signs, is there an opportunity to partner with like the local schools, art classes, to have them, if you will, wooden signs versus the,
You can, yes. So I was pricing out the corrugated plastic ones. You can buy those plain on Amazon fairly cheap and have someone marker them up. I just don't know what they'll last. You could have good signs painted. I mean, you could partner with whomever on any of this.
I think we need 2 different kinds of signs. I see a short-term immediate need of please take care of this area. You know, coming soon. We can come up with cute wording that, and then say walk on the path, to try to prevent erosion and just to make it so that the seeds will establish. And then I see a potential collaboration for a partnership with an educational sign that's much more long-term, with conservation, given that we have the path coming behind or something up front even that could be changed out at the top of the hill, either way, to kind of a more permanent signage thing that could be educational outside of the building as part of our building fund budget going forward even. But I do see an immediate need for something that's temporary for a year or 2, depending on how things grow in.
That could be something that the art class paints, or it could be the things you bought. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But it's something that should be thought about and ordered fairly soon. We have been talking.
We
with
talked to Amy Green.
Who is outrageously excited about having a pollinator garden over there. Has all kinds of ideas on how to partner with her on using it, you know, signage and programs and everything else. So.
And she was quite comfortable with a temporary sign that's not much more like a campaign sign. She was fine with that.
Green?
She's the conservation agent, works for the conservation commission.
And then she took off with ideas. She was planning to meet this week. Unfortunately, the person could not, to see if our field could be put on a tour of wildflower fields, like a house tour, basically, thing. So she's excited
that's cool.
by that we have this thing being established. And she also got excited about an idea of like, if they don't have much of a budget. So if we had a budget for bringing in some sort of program person to do a presentation, they would help advertise things like that too. And she said Pollinator Week is the week starting June 20th. So we might have a tie-in if we wanted to think about book displays, things like that too, or a program if we want to see if this person, we got to look at the budget and whether it works, but to see if this presenter could come in and do that kind of thing too, for that week, if we wanted to do a themed week around a national pollinator week. It also, so one of the things that has been happening, I noticed on the Facebook trends, is that people were upset by how the area, the landscape around the library currently looks. Because now things are turning green and they just think we left it a mess. And so I did my best to explain what was happening and that we are working with conservation and we're not ignoring it. We're trying to establish the landscape. And it's happening, but I do think the signs will help us advocate to help people understand why the netting's still down. Why is the silt barrier still down? Why does this look brown still when it should be turning green, given it's spring? So do you think a quick signage might be appropriate? And we don't have to put all 10 out. We could put
It's,
5 out and then
Yeah.
save 5 for when they blow away or break.
it's cheaper to buy them in lots of 10.
Lots of time.
So, and I don't know that that means that all 10 have to have the same message or not. I didn't get that deep into the discussion, but if you buy 10 with the holders, it was about $50.
Is that Staples?
I talked to Case Center and Acton, and I emailed Printing Solutions investor, but I have to kind of look from them. There's also a place in Air, but I haven't asked them. You can order them online too. It might be slightly cheaper.
Staples might be cheaper as well.
I don't know. You also have to decide, like, do you want to print it on both sides or one side? You might save a little bit on one side, but not probably not so much.
That for about $9 each for both sides for graduation ones for our school when there was COVID.
So I just started the process. If someone wants to run with it, I would suggest you reallocate money up to some number to run with the signs, and then someone can
I can take
start
signs.
looking.
Do you want to do
into
signs?
it.
That would be great, Wendy. I do think we should allocate some money
So
tonight so we can just run.
are you comfortable with 200? Or you want 250 or?
You give me a budget and I'll work within it.
You have one quote for 200.
I have one quote for 200.
Is that all in?
So
Chicken?
the place was inactive.
Oh, yeah.
Including gas money?
So
25.
So I'll make a motion that we allocate $250 from the MMDT account for signage for the wildflower cart.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
This,
Sorry, you passed me the quote, then I will.
yep, I will forward you right now. The silt fences and things are probably going to stay up until the fall. That's the plan, until things are more established. You should decide if they come back with a quote from Cataldo on overseeding, decide whether you want to do it or not. It still comes under the library project budget. It's just, as they're closing out, I don't know who's approving what anymore. Right?
Sounds like we might be approving costs at this point.
Yeah, so, or give them a budget up to, it's probably in the $3,000 to $5,000 range was what they were talking, but I really don't know.
Yeah, they didn't
They
say.
haven't gotten back to us as far as I know.
Can someone follow up with Brian?
Yeah, sure.
I'm assuming they're going to Brian.
They're going to Brian, but yeah. So at this point, it probably can still be done under the budget. Sam could say if it's, in the $5,000 range, or whoever's interacting with Brian can say, you can still do it under the budget because it hasn't been closed out, but pretty soon it's going to be in nothing, and you're not going to be able to submit any money without a trustee's vote. So,
Okay, let's do that ASAP. Oh, okay.
building things.
They've reallocated, or reset the settings to try to address the issues with the electricity.
Yes, so yes.
Yeah, that was one of my questions for the field, but
So, they said one of the reasons the electricity use was higher than they were expected was because the setback thermostats weren't perfect. So the building was always staying at a certain temperature.
Wow.
So,
even then they,
so they programmed the setback thermostats now. So unfortunately, you're also out of heating season, so you're not really gonna be able to tell if that's saving, that was really the issue. I'm also thinking one of the reasons the setback thermostats, so I don't remember this, but they said the setback thermostats were set because someone was complaining about being cold. And I'm thinking the reason people were complaining about being cold is not because of the temperature, but because of the wind chill. In certain rooms, in certain areas, you can feel the breeze. And I think that's what the problem is, not. I think if they came back and actually looked at the amount of air pushed out of some of those vents, it's too high. And then the temperature won't matter as much, right? If you stand kind of by the saga room, you can hear air flowing a lot louder than you should. And some of those meeting rooms are pretty loud. So we should continue to push on them to make sure that the system is tuned properly.
so
If you're in the
it's
fiction
under
area, you
warranty,
don't
not
hear it.
much longer. We should get them back ASAP too.
Yes, so I think that's actually the engineer that needs to come out to look at that, not.
Is Brian on that?
I don't know if he still is or not. I haven't talked to Brian.
I can check with him.
I don't believe he is.
Okay, I think we need
The
to
last
follow up
email
with
was that
Brian
it was
on,
resolved.
on this one. This is a big,
Yeah.
because if we're just gonna run into the issue with the setbacks again, because people are cold, then
And we still have issues that the lights in the fiction area will randomly turn on at night.
is that part of the airflow issue?
That was
It's loud
unclear.
over there.
The fiction is not as loud as the nonfiction, but, but it might be. So,
It is.
so we're trying to figure out why the lights randomly, the lights in fiction, if you go out in the parking lot and watch, the lights will turn on and off all the time in the fiction area. So that's not your cause of the electric bill. The lights take almost no power compared to the AC, the heating system. So,
But if the heating system is cranking and the airflow is causing the lights to trigger it, then we have an issue.
It just seemed like it's worth, because I was sitting over here and it just, when people walk by the small kitchen, the lights go on in the kitchen. Like, even if they're not walking into the kitchen. So I don't know if that's by design or not, but it seems like the engineer whoever's responsible for that comes out and takes a look. I'm not sure that's necessary.
Unless
If you're not
someone
actually
enters.
going into the kitchen. So again, that's not the cause of it, but
so
Meanwhile, you go into the storage area and you have to like half walk into the dark before it turns on. So I was in there today, flailing, trying to get the lights on.
is there also a consideration when we're looking at those bills that, I mean, this building is getting used so often and on Sundays and is booked all the time. Is that being taken into account when they're looking at these numbers? Because
Yeah, how does the setback, like when does the setback kick in?
6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
I think it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I will tell you that by the end of the day, the Sturts room was pretty hot on Sunday. So I think the idea that this, I don't know how, there needs to be some other way of programming or overriding the thing when the building's in use on a Sunday that the room should have cooling themselves or come on, right? It's not just on a schedule, it should also be on occupancy, like the lights, if that's at all possible. So.
Hello.
Well, she passed another one.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
You are our public participation. Welcome. So for those, just for the video, Sarah Donovan's on the ballot for the next library trustee. So we're very thankful you stepped up to run. Thank you.
The other thing on the building project is those solar panels are progressing, I think. Keep seeing emails going back and forth between Brian and the engineer and the solar company. The last I heard, they thought the panels would be here sometime in June. I don't know if that's still accurate or if anything's changed.
I haven't heard any updates on it yet.
So the last one I got is they were still deciding on the bolts or how they were going to attach, and then I think I've dropped off the chain again. So
Okay, I will try and add you back onto the chain.
I'm not sad to not getting all the emails, but I know I'm responsible
Honestly,
for it.
I have a hard
You are
time
now
keeping-
responsible for
I
it.
probably get the emails.
I haven't seen any emails either, so I don't know if they've even been.
There was one in the past day or two about what size bolts,
Oh,
right?
then I've dropped off the emails.
Sam has agreed to keep my email active, at least until the building's closed out, so I can keep. on
Eventually,
those
we are kicking you out, just so you know.
But maybe not till solar.
Not until the solar panels are on the building and the warranty is closed. So just so you know how long you're staying
I'm
on.
not sure any of those are any much. I mean, they just go and go and go, and that's kind of thing. So I'm getting.
Yeah.
But if I can go back in, that'd be great.
So a lot of those, you assume that Brian knows what he's talking about. and
Yes.
hopes. Yeah.
Yes.
It was the same way in the building project, when we were sitting on these meetings that we're going over the construction things, and they're talking about this, that, and the other, you just listen for your name to be called.
You're really inspiring.
I can do that.
They were talking like pound square PSI for concrete, like, oh, I have no idea. Yes,
All right.
is there anything else on the building that we're missing?
Did you want to talk about the quote for the?
Yeah, we
for
can do that now.
shelves?
So everyone in their packet should have a Tucker quote. Do you want to explain or would you like me to?
Sure. So we asked them to give us a frame for to install some shelving. So we already have the shelving left over from everything else. So we just need a frame to attach for the reference area. So we got a quote for that. We got a quote for a new end cap for that area because we do have end caps, but they're all lefts or rights.
They're all right.
They're all rights.
We need a left. So we could just try to reuse one of those, or we could get the correct one. And then I also asked for 2 more meeting room dollies because the meeting room dollies we have, they stack too high and they
For the
almost fall out
chairs?
for the chairs, for the meeting room chairs. So
They're
they,
above our heads.
yeah. So
It's dangerous.
they gave us a quote for 2 more. And then while she was here, I also mentioned that we want to get rid of some of the old shelving, but we've pretty much already done that, right? So I don't know if we really need them to take away anything.
So there is still wood component pieces that were misordered.
So I can talk to her. I know you didn't. We can talk to her about them.
We
taking
did
care.
not take the wood out of the storage areas.
Okay, so I will talk.
I believe we took the correct shelving that you marked
Right.
for us to take.
So yeah, so I'll talk to her about that. There was some shelving that they never ordered that they're not charging us for, like in the periodicals area, and there's still some tops for the children's room that need to be installed. And I think there's one other area that was chipped that they're going to fix. So I will inform her that she should remove
At
anything.
that time, they did
anything.
take the misordered
Right.
pieces.
So yeah, so I can ask her to remove the labor part for the removing the components, but if you want the shelves and the frame for the shelves and the end cap and the 2 dollies, that would come out of I guess what
Trust.
the trust, right?
Because Brian said he wasn't sure. It's
It's
part of
beginning
that.
to come into the trust or the extra fundraising or whatever. It's the trustees portion of
The trustees portion of the
the
bill
bill.
at this point,
So these shelves would be on.
where the
in-
reference
In the
desk is.
reference desk.
So the computer section upstairs, there's the reference desk, and right now there's a few things on a cart. But there's a space for a 7-foot shelf attached to the wall of the Saga room. So you don't see it unless you're in that area. But the idea being that there's some reference materials there that live there, But also there's some, in the old library, there was a shelf for community items that were shared, like the Girl Scout materials, there are Cub Scout materials there, and those don't currently have a place to go. So one idea we had was to make that like a community shelf plus a reference shelf area. Since we had the metal shelves already. And we just needed to upright the metal bracket piece. So the one thing about we have a right-handed face panel.
Three right-handed.
We have multiple right-handed face panels. And that were misordered. And so the question is if there is a handy person around who could make it a left-facing panel, then we may not have to expend the $940 that are for that piece. But I have yet to bring my husband over to say, can you make this happen and not destroy it? Or make it look like the others without totally destroying it. So I haven't had a chance to ask him if he can use his carpentry skills to do so. So one idea would be to tonight authorize for the panel as well as the dollies and the frames that we need. And then if he can make it happen, to just don't tell them yet that we're doing it until we know if we need it or not, if it's feasible for us to flip it. Thoughts? Do we trust a local person to see what happens?
We have
Yeah.
3 of them that we aren't using.
Yeah, I was like, we have 2 errors basically
Right.
before.
I can volunteer Saul to help them.
Awesome.
too,
I'm
so.
gonna say I'll put Jonathan in that mix.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely think someone.
I feel like it's worth investigating.
It'll give them a project.
It will give them a project. And there are multiple problem solvers in that crew. So if it can't happen, then we'll just order it. But
Lots of tools.
Yeah.
Yes.
and then we needed like the acrylic plate.
Well, you can, she said if you try to take that off,
Will it crack it?
she doesn't think you'll be able to just pull it off because it's in there it's not screws, it's like almost like staples.
Interesting. Okay, so we need to order a plate for the
Romance area.
romance paperback section.
There's 3 extra right-handed ones.
Yes.
So there's an opportunity to mess up twice.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I was like, this seems like a worthy mess up, given that they're just going to go in the trash otherwise. So, which is really sad that there's 3 mess ups.
So the amount would be, should we want to take it off in hopes that somebody can, one of our people can do it, or should we authorize? Because I'm just looking at the number if we authorize it versus if we don't authorize it.
I would recommend us authorizing for the panel, so the complete amount, so that if we discover this weekend, we don't have to come back together to authorize it.
It looks like you're getting the same amount.
Yep, it looks our math is the same.
So Sam, is 2 dollies enough? Or are you going?
Yeah.
We already have 2.
Yeah, we already have 2 that are on dollies in the storage room. And it's about the same amount of chair. I think I just cut it in half. So the $2, the remaining chairs should be enough for $2.
Sorry, and I'm just gonna ask again for this too, because I don't see it. Any shipping or tax or anything that we need to worry about here?
No tax because we're a tax exempt organization. And shipping, no, it would be labor because they'll bring it with them.
Wait, is that then included in the
All right,
item C?
It might be.
so we were gonna scratch item C.
Yeah, I don't know if it's all the labor or just the labor to remove. It might be all.
This looks, it says labor to remove extra components currently in the storage closet. However, the other items do not say
Right.
labor to install, so it's hard to tell.
Right. I can ask her. So it probably wouldn't be more than.
It says price includes wall mounting and
Okay,
double frame.
you're right.
facial. It also says we're using one of the right shelves, but we're not going to, are we?
No.
Because it's up against the wall.
Correct. I don't think we've used. We should check what happened in the nonfiction up against the wall to see if they needed the right shelf. Before we destroy 3, we're gonna check that out tonight.
See where?
I'm gonna go tour the nonfiction where it's up against the wall on the far side. If they have an end cap there,
It has an
right up against the wall.
Yeah.
We should do the same on this
Oh,
area
wait,
then,
you know,
the nonfiction, right?
in the
on,
nonfiction.
on the nonfiction, on the wall up against the meeting room. Or against the,
Against the meeting room. It definitely has one by the door.
and I don't think it has one by
It doesn't have.
the meeting room because there's no, the shelves are right up. against-
We'll just double check if we need the right-handed.
I think that's probably why we have it right-handed, is because we bought them for both sides.
They didn't need it. That would make more sense.
And then that would also be true when the fiction, they probably did the same thing, right?
There's end caps on both in fiction because they float. I think.
I didn't know if one. No.
We clearly have not memorized this building yet. Okay,
The one over by your chair.
there's an end cap on it. I can tell you that one. That whole line is an end cap. Do we want to add a little bit, not to exceed number 1?
Yeah.
Just
2,200, 2,300, something like that.
just under 200. Sure.
And is this coming from MMGT?
Yes.
So it can come out of the building project still,
Yeah.
right?
If this one can come out of the building project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it can use it fundraising money for.
Okay, let me try it then. Move to. Motion to move $2,300 from the building fund account to pay for shelves and stuff.
And the
Cool.
dollies.
Shelves and dollies is on the quotation from Tucker Library Interiors on May 3rd, 2022.
Second.
All in favor or any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So I should clarify on the building.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Mark,
So what's closed out on the building account is things that Commodore is responsible for, right? Which is the building
Gotcha.
and the grounds. The stuff in the interior, like the shelving and like the refrigerator that needed under warranty things, that is not part of the Commodore contract. That is a separate contract that is still open, I believe, right? So what they're trying to do is release Commodore completely. So you'll still have the little things on, you know, the shelving that can be still going on under the contract, but Commodore will be closed out. You want to close out the other one eventually too, but you don't have to do it. I mean, like, we could pay Cataldo for the grass seed still without involving.
yes,
This is the black one.
It's fine,
Okay.
it's fine, yeah.
are you following us? You don't need to.
So-
Well, it's good to, know what's going on.
Okay. This is done. Anything else under building?
So we are having issues with the outlets in the staff break room. And so GGD, it's coming out tomorrow to take a look. There's a microwave plugged in there, and every time someone goes to use it, the breaker trips. So I explained to him that he has to come out here. So he's coming out here tomorrow to look at that. It might also be there's a water heater for the sink in there, and they had to come back, I think, 3 times to fix it because it never got hot enough. It was never even sort of hot. And so I think the water heater is electric and it might be drawing too much power, and that's causing the microwave or anything else that we plug into the outlets that are above it to trip. So anyway, when he's gonna come tomorrow to take a look at it.
And you'll point that out.
Yeah.
when he comes.
And then the refrigerator, the repairman was out here today and he took a look at it. It turns out the digital interface was broken, so he has to order a new part for that. So he's working on getting that for us. So basically, we were telling it what temperature to go to, but it was broken, so it never worked.
So the other thing on the building that we talked about with Commodore and Ryan was spouting for the torrential rain.
Oh, right, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's something else they're supposed to be working on.
So at the staff entrance, if it's raining, Sam says it's a sheet of water coming down. So they're going to put down spouts to try and direct that basically into the corner of the building. But I don't know when that's happening. And that probably will come on.
Yeah, I'll ask Brian about
Probably is
that.
not covered,
I
and it
think
will
it's
be an
an
additional
ad.
expense.
Also, the water bottle filler,
Yeah.
I figured out that was also a breaker. It keeps tripping the breaker.
Can you ask them why it might be tripping that one too tomorrow?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
I think that's it for building updates.
Okay. Do I have building things? I don't think so. All right, trustee updates. Let's start with everyone else because I don't remember what I did this month. Go ahead, let's go in a circle.
Okay, I don't actually remember doing anything this month. I know I've been to the library also this month, but I went back, so I don't actually have anything.
Redeemed a lot of bottles and cans, so that was, my kids lost interest, the novelty wore off, so I stopped doing my activity. But, so, yeah, that kept me busy for many afternoons doing that. And I helped with the book sale. I was sad that I was away, I couldn't come, but my kids and husband came and found a few books, so they enjoyed that.
Awesome. Chris, do you have any? Do you want to do it? Next month you get to. Wendy.
I helped with the book sale setup and the sale itself, I want to second mark, the NHS kids were amazing. I don't know if the trustees ever write a thank you to NHS, is that a thing we do?
We should.
And I'm happy to take
I know
that.
the Friends wrote a thank you.
Okay, is it appropriate for us to do that as well?
I would say yes.
I
If
can
you
do
would
that.
like to do that, I fully
They
support
were-
that.
They were machines, they were amazing, and Miss Harvey was amazing for keeping it all organized, and she basically lived here, so I would give a shout out to both of them. One thing that a couple of patrons that were at the book sale, I think it's appropriate to bring up here, just as a note for like discussion like longer term, is that they said that in other book sales, sometimes there's a section that is focused on diversity and inclusion in the book sale. And both patrons were noting that we didn't have it set up that way and or they didn't find many books about that way, specific to a more diverse population. One woman said, my grandson is Black and Jewish, and there's no book about him in your book sale. And could hear that these books are donated. But we had a nice conversation about where we're soliciting books from. Do we need to start thinking about that differently as the Littleton community is changing too, and where we're getting books from? So it was a really nice conversation around that piece of it. And so I said I would bring that back to the trustees. The other conversation that came up, there was a crew of sports ball people coming through with cleats on and concerns about the floors. And there was a question of when we are going through policies, do we need to look at having a policy about shoes with pointy things on the bottoms that could really damage floors that we just put in. So I said I would throw that out here too. And then the other thing that has come up after when I've been here on my Girl Scout business is that there are some groups who feel the coffee cart is like a buffet of hot chocolate after hours. Between that and the sugar, and it's like a free-for-all. So I don't know that we want to micromanage that or just want to make a note of that piece.
Do you have hot chocolate? We're not offering hot chocolate.
or just take that out, and I feel like it's a little Scrooge-like, but it was really like something to see.
That did come up a little bit at the Friends meeting, so they were.
Okay.
So
So
they-
as long
they
as
know.
that's just on radar.
I mentioned it to
As
Sarah.
long as there's not unlimited.
After you mentioned it to me, I opened the drawer. I was like, you're right, there is no hot chocolate.
Yeah,
And then I told Sarah.
and then another group said this to me again, and I'm like, I will bring it to the trustees, so I'm narking on the people eating the hot chocolate, straight without the water, so I've done my job, so that's my day.
So to add on to the coffee cart conversation, I do not recommend a glass jar be placed on the coffee cart. Because when that glass jar hits our floors, it shatters pretty readily into a zillion pieces. So yeah, I think they fixed it though. I believe it's an acrylic money thing now, which is good.
So can I add something?
Please.
So there's a leader of a younger troop who has been advocating to be able to use the room in children's room for crafts and not the really fancy, carpeted conference room. So. I'm just
Yeah,
raising that.
I've mentioned that as well. I think we need to, I haven't actually talked to you about that yet. So there are some younger troops who want to use paint and things, and just the kids are of the age where paint will spill and whatnot.
Mm.
And in our policy, we do not allow them to borrow the children's craft room. And I said we would discuss it because I think our meeting room policy is one that we might need to reopen soon anyway. There's been a few questions from staff and whatnot. But I would be interested, Sam, if you would talk to the staff and see if that's even something that we could entertain.
So would this be after hours?
So I would argue that it needs to be during hours, but just because otherwise they have access to the children's room. But then what do you think?
So, yeah, if it's after hours, that room is one of the few rooms on this floor that's locked. So that would mean they would have access to the whole children's, if they're going through the hot chocolate, who would let it
Yeah,
with the room. So that would be one concern. Yeah, we can talk about it and figure.
Can you
something out.
talk to the staff and see if
Yeah, I'll
that's
talk to
something that's
Diane.
feasible?
Yeah.
The other option would be, is there ways to do those like tablecloth things that we can lay down, tarp, or put,
Well,
like
you
offer
can
them in
also
the storage.
Use just the hall. So
If it's after
gallery,
hours, they can use the hall.
They can use the gallery where there's
Right.
vinyl flooring.
After hours, I feel like there's some options out there, but during hours, I guess I would want to push back a little bit on that room not being proprietary or a librarian's room as much as a community room and available to rent. That you just happen to.
Unless
have
it's
to
being
walk
used
through.
for children's
Right,
programming,
absolutely.
and then
Well,
that's
of course,
totally different. Yeah.
100%, if it's being used for programming, 100%. But if it's not being used actively for programming, it's the perfect space for that, and it is available, and
So,
Do you know the
so,
occupancy?
so that room should be put on the room reservation system like the other rooms.
given priority to library programming, like anything else, would be my 2 cents. But again, if we're gonna revisit the policy, that's fine. Obviously, we want librarian input, but we don't want to interfere with their use of it in any way, shape, or form. But I think that it's a perfect room for that, and it's built not just for the odd librarian time, but for.
Having been a Girl Scout leader of our younger troop, we always use the school's art room because it could be messy and it wouldn't damage things. So I completely appreciate this leader's concern.
The only thing about having an archive-only meeting and making it available during library hours is that it's such an informal space I saw kids in there yesterday, going in and just, that's where like the crafts are done, like, there's always a craft to do, there's always like something to cut out.
That is
and
true.
Stuff like that, and that's just kind of an ongoing thing that Diane always has ready to just go into the craft room and do. And so I wouldn't want it to be a place that's like booked so often that those people that just drop in can't.
And
use
our
it.
meeting rooms are booked often, so would people then go sit in there to do their work because they can reserve
Or
it?
even if it's for Girl Scouts or something like that, it's still, like, what if that's 2 hours on a day when someone comes in, it's like, oh, I wanted to go, it feels like it's not giving the kids who are just coming in to use the children's room access to that space during that time, and I feel like they probably should.
It's probably like a medium with, booking time for, again, we're talking to the librarians and saying like peak traffic time typically is these hours, and so we're gonna reserve it for the librarians for that time, and I think Girl Scout troops would have to work around that piece, or any other troop using it would have to work.
Is there any way that you, I mean, I know it's a smallish room, but like anyway, I mean, it's troops are too big, right? They couldn't use like half of the room, right? Need half of it for just kids being able to come in and out, yeah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't go there.
yeah.
That would
There's a
be-
safety
Yeah.
concern too for Girl Scouts.
So- So I think you can also write the policy to allow people in there after hours, if you choose, right? But then you're going to have to put extra caveats on it, right? Where there has to be, ratio of adults or something that you're gonna want to.
We're not gonna be able to
avoid
police that though. So
No.
this,
As a Girl Scout
But-
leader
but
who's
you-
watching it
the way you-
happen now.
that. The way you police it is you don't let them back in if they violate the policy, right? So,
I think the risk of, again, as a Girl Scout leader who's used this room, and has been on hands and knees cleaning up under the table with girls that are really fairly responsible, I've also chased them to see, I've just said it because they're curious of what's in the kitchen. I've had them in and out of every bathroom. I've had them trying to open to get back into the YA room. I've had them really curious about what's in the big room. I've had them, and that's with girls that are really fairly well behaved and like the fear of God, because I'm the mother, right? And I'm the trustee here. So I would be really concerned. I've watched other kids from other groups, with like a little less fear in them and what's behaving. So I would be very concerned being around the books and other commodities.
I am not comfortable with them being in after hours. To be honest, having had younger scouts and older scouts and
Yeah.
Cub and Girl Scouts, I don't think that's a door I am willing to walk through.
Yeah.
And I think you would
Me
agree.
And frankly, I think it's gonna be a trial anyway, just even with paints, because I don't feel the need to be an art room for other troops or for other activities. I think that, it's respectful for a troop or for, mom and me group to say, I want a place that's not potentially gonna leave a big mess on your floor or things like that. And if we have the space, I want to be able to offer that if it's not impacting other functioning or things like that. But I also think that people have different standards of what cleanup is. We're already seeing that.
And
in
I
the rooms
do, I
upstairs.
think we need to reopen our meeting policy with staff feedback
Yes.
on that policy to address many of these issues that keep coming up. So I do think this one needs more work, and I would love staff input on the meeting room policy, the new version,
Okay.
to see where we can improve it. And this being one of them, can we offer this space, at least to try, and if it totally fails, we'll take it off.
If it's really, really limited hours, or really, really, like, it just not up to you.
And limited to children, is that what we're?
I would like to.
I don't think that is an appropriate place for an adult to borrow to like work from the library for the day.
100%.
It should be for groups of children
Yes, small groups and limited.
with a
numbers of
directed
groups.
adult guiding them.
With many.
Multiple adults, at least the safety ratio, which for Girl Scouts would +1.
I think it's okay to also say for a specific purpose, like if other rooms are booked and you just want to be in there, but you're kind of a louder age that, and you don't need that kind of space, the answer can still be no. And I think that would be.
This might be one where
Organized group.
an organized group then needs to call or go to the CERT desk to work this out too.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be through the reservation system.
Right.
Special request.
well, yeah, it should be reservable. but
Should be
it doesn't have to
reservable.
Be reservable
Online.
online.
Yeah.
Yes, it-
I agree.
And it's involve whichever, like, if it's gonna be Diana, or if it's gonna be Jean, or whoever's gonna be down there. I'm not necessarily, it's just like, they should be a part of it in case they had a plan for that day or something like that, or, just, I think that's a good argument for not just being able to do it online, but like,
I do think it needs a conversation.
yeah.
And on your categories for the book sale, I suggest sending that to the friends because they can organize the books for the book sale and in their room,
Yeah.
however they choose. They
That's
just,
a good feedback.
Sure.
yeah,
I can send you friends.
they change the categories all the time, so.
And again, I think that the conversation was just a good one to bookmark because in general, I think, it's always revisiting what we're doing through a DNI lens, in general, like from displays to everything else and, bring it up and in.
You have an update.
I spent a lot of time at the book sale. I was here for the walkthrough for the closeout. Katrina and I spent, I don't know how many hours recently clearing out old shelves from this building and the old building. it seems like a lot. What else? I've worked with all those. Treasurer, so. What am I missing? I can't keep it straight.
Every time you text me, it is another thing that I realize I have to take on.
So, Katrina's been yelling at me that I shouldn't do things until I tell her, I should tell her in advance that I'm doing things rather than just CC her that I'm doing them.
Also, don't brainstorm with Mark because it's formed and suddenly have a meeting for after he's a trustee.
So Katrina and I have been talking a lot. With other groups, so.
Yeah.
So, and fortunately for me, they're next week.
Thanks for the work, Mark. So I also have done not as much as Mark this month. I was at the walkthrough and I organized volunteers to help Park and Rec clean out the old library to keep being our good neighbor helpers there. I thankfully went away for the book sale, although I was breaking down boxes at one point. And then I think I spent most of the last month trying to just absorb everything that you thought of. And so every time you think of something now you can't execute at this point, you just have to tell me about it. And I get to decide whether to execute or not. Or tell one of them.
Yep.
Which I know you've been doing. I feel like every time I do a trustees update, I've done more than I tell you, but I can't remember.
Yes,
I don't
staff
keep a
survey.
list. What?
You did the staff survey.
All right. I did a staff survey. You're right, I did. Yeah, we surveyed the staff to see if they could give us some feedback on various things like the trustees and what they think of our work, and Sam and what any thoughts they have on him, and then also what their goals are for the library in the future, because we need to set our goals, and I think they're an important part of making sure we take those into consideration. So we got about 70% of the staff completed the survey, which is great. And I think we got some really valuable feedback. And I would at a future meeting, I shared it with all of you guys. Once you're a trustee, I'll share it with you. And then I would at a future staff meeting like to come and just share it with them because they gave us the feedback. I think it's important for us to share it with them.
Sure.
The results with them. So let me know when your next meeting will be.
Sure.
Let's move to director's report.
Okay. I purchased with the LSTA grant funds, the Access for All grant that we received. I purchased a new video magnifier and a portable hearing loop system for the main circ desk. And I trained the staff on how to use it. I've talked with a couple of patrons on training them how to use it. I also met with, I got a quote for FM hearing system, which is sort of like a hearing induction loop system for this room. And it's similar to the one we have in the search room, and was installed by the same company. So I'm working on getting that done. I also met with the MBLC consultant for the project. Her name is Shelly Casada, and we did a tour of the building, discussed how I can go about accomplishing future programs associated with this grant. And she recommended a few people, including someone from the Perkins School for the Blind. And she informed me that he will come out and do training for the staff and do programs if we want. So that's something I'm working on doing. We also discussed already Tucker Library Interiors quote, but I met with Corey from Tucker, and she looked over some of the issues we've had with missing shelves. And I talked to her about fixing some things that are missing or were damaged when they were delivered. And so she is working very hard to get that to us as soon as possible. I met with Diane Douglas from the Showboat Valley Photo Club. They're going to start holding their club here at the new library. They used to be at the Westford Library, then the pandemic hit and they couldn't do it there anymore. So they're looking to use our library as a new home. And so their first meeting will be on May 11th, and they plan on it being a hybrid meeting. So they asked me if I would help them with that. And I'm interested in photography anyway, so I was going to go either way. So I'll be at that program. And after this month, will no longer be an officer on the MVLC executive committee. I will be a member at large, not president or past president anymore. So that will free up a lot of time. So that also means I won't be on the fiscal or personnel committees, which I'm okay with because they met a lot. So that's just an update on that. And then in May, we have several programs coming up. Last night, we had an author talk with Meg Stafford, and that was very interesting. She talked about some adventures she went on with her daughters in her book, and it was really interesting. Like I said, we have the normal children's programs and YA programs coming up. On May 12th, 19th, and 26th, we have Historic Voices of First Ladies via Zoom. And then at the end of the month, we have a music program called The Highwaymen with Matt York. He does songs and stories, and that will be on May 25th. And it might be in the Sturts Room or it might be outside if it's a nice day out. So we'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, and that's a free program. He got a grant from the Cultural Council. So that's he reached out to us about doing it. Door count, again, another huge turnout to the library. Circulation is also way up over previous years, so a lot of people using the library. It's been really great. And also rooms getting used a lot. So it's been a busy month. And as far as financials go, we're getting towards the end of the fiscal year. We're closing out the materials budget. We're sort of just focusing on that right now. And everything else is coming along well. Any questions? Yes.
I'm just looking at the program updates and the conference we started Wednesday's Book Club and Mystery Book Club. I'm sure those weren't the only programs that happened in April. Those are just kind of the recurring ones. I'm wondering if you can include, like, for example, if you have this list of library programs in May, like next month, that's in this section with the number of people that attended.
Okay,
So you
sure.
have to count for all of them.
Sure.
So I think also that will fit into our goals discussion later. So
You're falling way behind on the notary numbers. The notary ones took way off too.
we need to standardize whether these are pages or persons, like encounters.
60 notaries in a month is quite high.
That is high.
I had a question on the budget. We have enough room in the staff budget to have another staff meeting before the end of the year. Rather than turning money back to the town,
Right.
I'd rather see us have a staff meeting.
Okay.
If you have the budget for it.
Yeah, I have
It's gonna be
to.
closer.
Yeah, I know we're getting close, so I have to. I'll take a look, and if there's money, I'll definitely have a step in.
Oh, the photo club that's doing a hybrid meeting, is this machine available to groups to use in the library for hybrids, or and is the staff trained on how to set it up?
No, no
No
to
on
both.
one or no on
No on both. So yeah, I was waiting until our meeting with LCTV next week to figure out how that room was going to work. I know Diane did speak to LCTV about something similar that we were planning on doing, and they explained it to her, and she was supposed to come and talk to me about it, but they said there's like some way to do it, but I'm not exactly sure because
The button or
so she sort of brought it up to me at town meeting. She kind of came up to me on the bleachers, and but she didn't really get into it. And then she's supposed to meet with me before this meeting to discuss how we're going to go about it.
So one of the things that Katrina said that I overstepped my bounds on was we were talking about better ways of collaborating and things, and we said LCTV was one example, and they have all the equipment in the search room to videotape meetings, but only LCTV can use it currently. So we said I reached out to them and said, could we have a meeting with you to talk about, is there a way to have a push button type system where people can either Zoom their meetings or videotape their meetings, or not necessarily to put on YouTube, but, or not LCTV, but maybe YouTube type things, like using their equipment without having to get into their room and having to, I mean, 'cause they have a lot of money invested in equipment in their room, and obviously they want to protect it, but if there's a way we can somehow use some of it safely and open that up to patrons and others, that would be a good idea. So there's a meeting on that next week, I think. And like we could, like when there's a magician performing, if they're okay with it, we could videotape it.
Right.
You know, or,
Yeah,
stream.
Diane is apparently from the photo club is apparently very technical. She has a lot of technical knowledge, so we were going to work together either next week. Well, it has to be next week at some point to discuss this. But like I said, it was a quick little conversation at town meeting, so I'm not exactly sure what she discussed with LCTV, but I know she did speak to them about something concerning the club meeting. So once I know, I will forward that information to all of you.
That would be great.
Okay.
All right. Any questions about the director's report? Other questions? All right, old business, the Terracycle bin.
So Margaret Gibbs reached out to me when we were sorting cans at the transfer station and said that she used to have a bin for Terracycle in the old library and was asked for one at the new library, and we delayed it until we had a policy. So she wanted to know if she could have one now and where it would go. So the Terracycle is a kind of a, it's kind of a different than the normal bin policy, because it's something that she wants here more long-term probably, but she does a pretty good job of taking care of them.
What is she collecting?
So Terracycle, she collects different things like printer cartridges and toothpaste tubes. She has a list of things
Okay.
that she can take.
That's great.
And then, you know, it depends on the vendor and different things.
Yeah.
But she takes those and then she sends them back, and they give her money for them that I think goes to a 4-H club or maybe a Girl Scout club too. So she has one at the transfer station. I think she might have tried to get one at Donald's, but I'm not sure.
She used to have one. I don't know if it's still there.
I know,
I'm still collecting. and I
Me
don't know if
too.
it's-
So there is one at the transfer station. The problem is, you know, a portion of the town doesn't use the transfer station and technically can't get in to put the things there. Don't know. So she wants it, she had it at the library to have a more publicly accessible.
And it's just one box, so you put the multiple things into one box. It's not
There's one-
separated
No,
by,
she has one box.
Yeah.
And
she separates it.
she separates it. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, she had it at the old library. And
it's
she,
probably
It's in the
like
back
2
end.
feet,
yeah,
2 feet cubed, something like that. So,
I'm 100%.
Me too.
so we
My,
just need to
so
tell
my
her-
only concern is where in the
Yeah.
library? Because I don't think a collection box permanently in the first thing you see when you walk in is especially one that's long-term always there, is necessarily the place for that.
Agreed.
So one option would be to use the
stroller parking.
stroller parking, which is not being used for stroller parking, as a long-term collection box area
Where's stroller parking?
on the other side of the stairs,
Oh. That's a good place for it.
next to the janitor's closet.
I think that's a perfectly good place to have the storage collection areas. And like the one that was doing the co-drive, it's the larger boxes would go better there.
I know,
The
the
only problem
larger
with
box
that-
has been removed.
Yes, I know. The only problem with that is then just advertising and directing people to the right
That
location.
is, so then you're gonna have more questions to staff to have to answer about explaining where it is.
So we have that community bulletin board now, which is awesome. And we could use that for that. And we can also put a slide up on the TVs that say, you know, collection boxes for X, Y, and Z downstairs.
Yeah, I mean, I think for something like the Terracycle, people who use it, like we used it regularly.
Right.
You'll know where it is and you can find it and make it part of their routine. I think for specialty boxes like Live and Drive, people who know about it are coming and that as well, so.
Should we try stroller parking for our collection box area and see how it goes? Does that work for you?
Sure.
Do you have concerns about this?
No, we had it in the old library. It was, nobody ever,
There was no problems.
there's no problem. And Margaret came fairly often too.
Starbucks used to have.
She took good care of it.
I will say that that box was well cared for, which was great,
Yeah, she did a great job.
in the old library.
Okay,
So the question is, then I have about our policy is that I believe you have to keep reapplying.
Yeah, it's probably policies.
So currently, according to our policy, she has to keep reapplying unless we reopen that policy.
That's what did you one?
I'll just
She
know it.
can.
You just said a recurring.
We're good.
So,
Does the staff want to do it?
With,
The recurring request to continue.
I think I'm the one who gets this out. I don't know.
So you don't mind if she does, just sets her thing to read.
so tell her that she can apply and CC someone, Sam or Katrina or someone.
Sure.
It is under the direction of the director, according to our policy, I believe.
And tell her where it's likely to be or.
Sure, I can tell them.
You can work it. Okay. You'll be very happy.
Start copying.
All right, new business, we have a number of policies. We also have our volunteer Google form discussion, and we also have the library director evaluation and goals.
So I think we talked about, we're gonna nix the policies again this month, because it's not gonna be, they're not urgent, you can come back to them, I think also based on the staff survey that we got, that we would like to probably start to include the staff in some of the policies, because they wanna know what we're doing about those. And so I thought it might be a good idea to start with the ones we haven't approved yet, kind of bring those to the attention of the staff, and then update those, then we can circle back to the ones that.
We open the others.
Yeah. Sam, does that sound reasonable to you? Do you have an idea of, is there like a little team that might want to look at them? Is it everybody? I feel a little bit weird about opening Google Docs up to.
I think we should give them to Sam.
Yeah.
And Sam
Okay.
will
You'll manage that?
Yeah, I'll do that.
collect
And
feedback from staff.
yeah, and I'm planning to do more meetings with them anyway, so that's just something I can bring up.
Okay.
So before our next meeting, do we want to pick a few of these? to
I
do?
would say, I mean,
They had feedback from the trustees on some of the
Yes.
lists that we have now, so it seems like whatever you want to give Sam would be.
which are the ones, maybe,
Which is the
what
one
are the ones that
that
they care about the most too?
I like volunteer policy.
they want that one.
So volunteer, great.
Finance is a gift. It's more of a trustee
Okay.
thing than a,
I think the rest are more
yeah,
pro forma type. Just,
yeah.
They are. So
Do
in that
they
case, we
not?
want to open meeting room back up.
I would.
I would
I would
open the
suggest
meeting.
meeting
room.
room.
I think the other ones are, the internet policies and
These are
confidential
just,
policies are just read them and approve them and.
honestly,
make
we
sure
could do that
there's no
tonight,
typos.
just check them off the list. If
Which is the one that the Friends needs to read?
they're doing the, it's not on here, they're doing the general policy.
Thank you.
And the policies we have approved are up now or not?
No,
So that's the other
that's
thing.
part of the problem.
So
Is that,
I think those should be formatted in
let
whatever
me try to do
format
that.
and published. And then tell the staff, these are the ones we approved, and ask them for comments and which ones they think we should reopen.
Okay,
Great.
That would be my suggestion.
I can do that.
I would like to hear what concerns staff have.
No, I think,
No, I
well,
think
we've already approved
we
them,
can
so,
reopen them and do them again.
so publish them, have the staff go through them.
I do think part of our problem is the staff didn't realize we were updating policies and because they weren't posted. So they're looking at old policies, things we already thought we fixed.
Right.
There's some confusion about what version they've seen.
I
So-
will get started on that.
So I would suggest posting them and then having the staff suggest which ones should be reopened and why. And then at the next meeting or in meetings in the future, reopen them and, you know, in whatever cadence you want to do it. But you have to publish them so that they can.
And you can collect feedback to share with us.
I think given that it's we'll just leave them.
Yeah.
Even the easy ones, we'll leave them for next time.
Great.
And partially because they already said stuff.
Okay, so there's a couple things and they're kind of, we've already taken care of two of my things. So under library director evaluation
Wait,
and
can we,
goals
for
discussion.
volunteer Google form, can we just?
I don't know.
Okay.
Let's,
We'll
and
move
since
on.
we're doing the
Okay.
volunteer policy, let's
Okay,
look at the form at the same time. In my opinion.
I like it.
thank you.
So today, so first, for the first time, we did our director evaluation not in public meeting because we did it a different way. So every trustee took the evaluation form for Sam and gave feedback on it. And then we compiled everyone's comments and Wendy joined me today to review them with Sam. So Sam has been doing a great job and was rated 3, 4, or 5 in every area. I did not bring it with me. We can go over in detail if we want, but I did share it earlier with everyone. So Sam has done a great job helping to finish this building, continuing to close out the building, helping lead the staff through COVID and all of those changes, and moving into this building. This has been a big year of things that have happened. And COVID, yeah, everything, COVID again. So I think there's been a lot of great things.
Staff turnover.
So we looked through the last year's goals and saw where they stood. They're nearing completion for the most part. There's some things that due to the building or other things haven't gone as far. We'll just continue them next time. But at this point, I think we need, in order to set Sam's goals for his, what are they called? Performance objectives for next year, we as trustees need to set our goals of what we want to do going forward. And I think for years, everything has been so building focused that we are at a really good transition spot to say, what is it that we as trustees need to do? The staff needs to start building again now that they're in the new building and under the guidance of Sam, and then where is it that we want to go? So I don't know if we want to just quickly share some feedback of what we think we want to do, but I think what I would like is over the next week for you guys to email me what you want to see happen. And I think they're going to end up falling in some buckets, if I guess, some general buckets. But that way we can meet with Sam, help make his goals for us to review at our next meeting. I can keep talking of buckets that I see, or if you guys can start, I would go either way.
Things we've talked about in meetings have fallen into kind of 3 main buckets, all of which kind of overlap. I think there's the cross-department partnerships within the town, and the more that we can be a good neighbor and breed those partnerships are so essential, especially as budgets keep getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And we've talked a lot at this meeting about how there's the people who love the library and value it, and the people who view it as too big or excessive or what have you. And I think that the more that we can be connecting with people to remind them of the value of the library, that it's not just the books, and how we provide forms for people when it doesn't exist elsewhere, or internet and all the other resources, is really just an important thing. And the more we can put ourselves out there is so essential. And so whether it's the pollinator event or more in depth with the council on aging, or being able to partner with Park and Rec or other pieces in town is so important. So that I think is a really big thing. I think how we communicate with the community is we're losing, as not losing, but as newspaper is not really the way to go. Are we doing enough on social media? Are we hitting the right audiences? Do people know the difference between the library and the Friends? That's come up here a lot, that people think they've donated to one, but they've donated to the other, or they think they've joined one, but they've donated. So there's some confusion about things like that. And there's so much vibrant programming that a lot of people just seem to miss somehow, despite it being in multiple places. Like I certainly see it on Instagram, or I see it on the calendar, but then how are things, are we getting the people we want to be getting out to, and are there other ways to kind of do that piece? And then I think for the other thing that you brought up, Sam, is the communication. It's been a real challenge with staff on different schedules. And so how can we support you in that? How do we get the team functioning out of kind of a crisis mode with COVID and into a team that's not worried about the building and more worried about how do they move and develop under a cohesive vision that you have for them forward? And as we look at staff that we potentially are going to be turning over to retirement, how do we get things out of their brain and into a system so that it's seamless as other people are filling their shoes? Because there's going to be some very big shoes to fill. So those are the kind of three things that have come up with this team pretty regularly that I'm thinking about.
I think some of those same things came up in the staff survey too.
Very much so.
Like I felt like their comments fell into the same buckets that we, maybe in different ways than trustees versus director versus staff versus friends, but the themes of like an advocacy, outreach, collaboration theme makes sense to me. And it looks different for each, whether it's a trustee or staff or director or friends. That communication internally, between Sam and the staff, between trustees and Sam, between the library and outside groups, I think that's another bucket I see. And then another bucket I think we need to keep challenging ourselves to do is to set the budget for how to use trust funds to advocate and support these other things. So it's there, but it's one of those things I think we need to invest our time in to establish a pattern, our plan, and then reevaluate our plan to see if it's working. That's how I see it. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, very, very similar things. And I was just thinking about how great it was that when you were at book sale, you talked to people. And I know that when we went to that breakfast, we were talking about how people who are library trustees tend to be introverts. We don't really want to go talk to people. But like the visibility at library events and talking and listening to people, both patrons and staff, we have the opportunity to.
I have to say the staff survey I found really eye-opening, in particular for the first thing we asked them is what should trustees do? What are we doing? And what should we be focusing on? And multiple comments came up about being more accessible. Well, we should be more accessible to patrons. We should be more accessible to staff. One suggestion for us was to host a regularly scheduled trustee coffee hour, open hour, that we could rotate who is responsible for at different hours of the day, depending on when it works for our schedule. So 1 month it could be not Mark, Wendy. 1 month it could be Chris. 1 month, we could go around and, only a couple times a year be the trustee in charge of that month for a meeting, and then allowing staff and patrons. And I have to say, especially over the last year and with the building and COVID, I fell into visiting the library at very specific times that worked for my schedule, which means I keep seeing the same staff and I'm not seeing other staff. And so in the last couple of weeks, I've tried really hard to break my habits. I still come when it's easy for me to come, but to try to prioritize coming at a time that I wouldn't typically come and to say hi to the staff who were here at that time. So that, again, came out of that feedback from the staff, just to be not always seeing the same faces every time I come in.
I think that was really important feedback, and I appreciated them saying that
I
because.
was really grateful for this.
Yeah, no, I appreciated the people, the librarians and everyone filling it out, because I am in the library probably the least frequently. In part because I'm like a COVID carrier half the time just for my job, and in part because my job hours have been ridiculous. So I feel like I'm the most helpful with people giving me tasks to support the library that doesn't take me into the library. So like I can pick up the phone at 7 or start, coordinating these 7 or policy or whatever people need me to do like after hours so that it's there for the library the next time we meet or things like that. But I haven't been in the building nearly as much as I want to be or have been historically. And so that was really eye-opening that that's been noticed, right? So I'm like, okay, got it. Like I can rearrange it, we'll do what I can around that piece of it, so.
Yeah, it wasn't something that I expected was a desire, right? Like it was surprising. I was like, oh, okay, good. Like that is, that they do want to see us taking a more active role, I guess,
Accessible.
be accessible, yeah. Not active role, because they were very clear too, like
I think
they don't want us interfering it, right?
Yeah.
But at least like, yeah, being accessible. I guess that was surprising to me.
I
because
do
they're
think
just
I have a
really
way of getting an idea for Sam. I get an idea in my head and then it just comes out to whatever staff member is there who's in head of that area or in that area. And I forget that my role as trustee, it sounds like a directive to them.
Yes.
And I recognize that can be off-putting, that sounds like they're being asked to do more work, but don't know the gains that would come from that really I should be approaching you. And so I will try to dial that back.
So be in Sam's office.
Yes.
Come on.
I feel like I'm in Sam's office a lot, but more time now.
So I'll add something from the historical perspective. I've seen a lot of the staff turnover, right? And it's changed the rapport with the staff a lot. Like I have a better rapport with the staff that's been here longer, and the people that are newer, they're either intimidated to talk to the trustees or kind of more harder to be friendly with in that way, because they still view you as like an overseer rather than a patron or an advocate for them, right? So it's the relationship has to change a little bit for them to realize that you're there to help them, not to manage them,
Yeah.
right? But on the other hand, as the staff turns over, they also need to be more accountable to us too, right? Like one of the things I think would be nice is to get more reports from Diane and Catherine and Jenna on what they're actually working on, right? And we get your report, but for them to specifically call out what they're doing so that we know as trustees how to support them, right? When you don't know what they're doing, it's hard to know that you're driving the bus in the same direction they're going, right? And we do need to do a better job of cross-community building. There's a lot of groups out there, the schools, conservation, park and rec, council on aging, all of these that need something that we can help them provide, right? It could just be as simple as a meeting room, or it could be, a cross program that they'll bring people in events to. They just want help publicizing it and organizing it, and an extra support. But I think reaching out, I'd really like to see much more of a partnership with the schools and understanding what's going on with each school and how the library can help for summers and even during the school year. When a project is coming up in the school, it would be nice to know that the AP history kids are going to be doing something, so we should have these books ready for them, or this list ready for them, or this reference resource available to help them, right? And just more of
And some of
a
that,
dialogue going on with the schools.
I agree with that. So I know that our librarians are responsive when students come in with the school project where they need to borrow the Who Was projects. And then Diane grabs the copy of whatever the requirements are for that one classroom and posts them because she knows that the fourth grade does a Who Was project and that all the kids are going to be coming in, and she put them front and center and pointed the kids to them, which is great. I do wish that the school had given us a heads up about it and that the project criteria that were posted wasn't just from the first parent who came with their classroom's requirements, because my son's requirements were different than the other classrooms. When I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. They do them slightly different. They get to the end the same, but so yeah, those kind of just heads up, like the school just letting us know, the principal or a teacher from that grade saying, hey, history kids are coming, or the fourth grade bus club, Who Was things coming, or this is our topic, third graders are coming, like whatever that is would be great. To that end, I actually have set up a meeting with the school administration on May 17th, I believe is the date, because I was at an event with Beth Steele and I opened the discussion of when school ends, there is that gap between the year, and so other than summer reading, which I know the lists were coming and whatnot, but I know this has been a challenging couple of years. What is it that the schools might need support that the library can provide for students to help them with continuing educational
Is that with Beth
things?
Steele?
I spoke to Beth Steele. So educational things they want kids to keep working on besides summer reading. That's a clear, everyone wins on that one. Or, whether mental health, social, emotional health things that they're seeing in the schools that maybe the library can fill in with some programming or social groups or a mental health presenter, or what is it that they're seeing that when school closes in June and doesn't reopen until September, we could be an umbrella for that period of time, the bridge between the two. So I set up this meeting with her. Conversely, as we're talking about hybrid programming and whatnot, and I spoke to Helen about this too, the mention of going forward, we might need programs for like book clubs and author visits that are in person and remote simultaneously. And I'm not sure our staff has the skills to run a program simultaneously in two modes at the same time. And Helen was like, I don't even know how to go about that. And I was like, we've had all of the teachers in town do that. I don't know how they got trained to do that. So that was one of my questions for Beth Steele. And I said, how did you teach your teachers to do this? And I recognize that we have two educators on this board who went through this, but I just asked her, like, how did you train the teachers? And she's like, she got excited. She was like, wait, you can expand your accessibility to people who are homebound or whatever. And she was like, I can absolutely point you to somebody who could help train your librarians to do this. So that again is that collaboration where we give and take. Like we give and we get. The other thing she did is she put me in touch with Heidi McGregor, because the idea of the Library of Things just made Heidi McGregor like, this is so exciting. You could put makey, and she gave me like 4 other things that maybe could go into the Library of Things to go into the children's room as things they could borrow for the summer to continue the education that kids already know how to use because they've used them in the think tank and then Imagitorium. So if that's something we want to fund, we need to budget that out and see if that's something we can do this year or if it's going forward, like we add it as we can. But
Can I join you at the meeting on the 17th? Thank you, because I work with Beth on the DEI task force. And I definitely would, like, one of the things I was thinking is like, I don't know how we could do it, but I really wish we could be as a library leaders in mental health and DEI. And I don't like, I don't know what the details would be to do that, but that's something that like, as a goal, I would like to see us kind of go in that direction. Not just for the summer, but like in general, like have that in the back of our minds, like how is this helping?
And I could not come to that meeting because of my work schedule, but I know the people. So if there are speakers you want, or, conversations or small group activities or make, stress toys or things like that, like I can get you people at no cost, like for drop-ins or things like that.
I do think we have a lot of things we can pull together that would help.
So not to pick on Diana or say anything on this, but like that fourth grade project we're talking about is a prime example of things that need to bubble up to us to the point that we can figure out how to help build the collaborations better. So these things aren't just, I mean, our librarians are awesome problem solvers.
Yes, they are.
But they shouldn't have to solve some of these problems if we can, cut them off before they become problems, make them simpler solutions. So that's what I'd like to see happen, is figuring out how we can develop the partnership so that, we know next month there's a fourth grade project coming up and we're prepared, right? Or, and maybe it's give and take too on some of these things that you suggest, the librarian suggests how they could alter the classroom work to better fit something based on their experience in the library. I mean, it's not just that we're giving, right?
I think that's where it goes back to communication for me, and I think that like as we're out of, do we have enough chairs mode?
Yes.
And you think back, because that project, I mean, I have a 22-year-old and a 12-year-old, and they've both done it. So it doesn't actually change, it's at a fairly predictable time of the year.
Right.
So we should be able to get ahead of that one, and we should be able to get ahead of the other ones that they do regularly throughout all the years. And like, I'll give you this small example. When I was meeting with Sam earlier, we had the friends and the librarians had the summer reading book list out during the sale, which was fantastic. But then we had a volunteer or two volunteers going through the book sale to find the books to pull for the library, as opposed to when we had 17 volunteers setting up the books when they could have pulled it, right? Because the lists weren't available then because we didn't. So it's like, and it's such a small thing. But if we can kind of get ahead of some of those things, then we have more manpower and can be a better friend to the schools and a better helper to the librarians and kind of do those sorts of things. And so that's where I feel like the communication, if we know it's coming up, then if we have a regular staff meeting or a department head meeting or whatever, then it does. And if we can partner and support that, the regular quarterly meeting in the schools or whatever, I'd be happy to. At the beginning, that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
And I don't think the trustees should be managing like the fourth grade relationship, but they should be making sure that the relationships are happening as smoothly. We should do whatever we can to smooth it out, right? And make sure that it happens or not that it happens, but as it's happening, we're removing any obstacles.
I think that goes back to the other thing that didn't get finished last year, no fault, ultimately of Sam's, because there was, A, the building, and B, it was hard to coordinate, but the job descriptions. And so like, I don't know what's in, the children's librarian's job description, but is there a priority to be developing a cross relationship? Is there a priority on D&I? Is there a priority on these sorts of things? You know what I mean? Like, so I'd be interested in seeing, because if it's part of your job description to be connecting and partnering with the schools and getting ahead of that, or partnering with other agencies, it becomes more important than another thing to do. You know what I mean? So I think that's just.
There is, I think, a balance, because they have a certain number of hours, and we overload them with things too. So I think this is a collaboration I initiated. We get Sam involved. Sam hopefully can join the meeting so that we can sit here, and then Sam can take, if we end up with contacts, who's the contacts, and then Sam creates the liaison. I have to look it up.
Okay.
We don't want anyone overloaded, but I'm also looking at like the YA librarian who has been able to pull this off within her hours. So I guess I kind of question, ultimately, it's not about a specific librarian being able to decide or not, but what do we expect that position to do and grow into? And especially when we're asking for more hours, ultimately, this then is that foundation.
So I also think going forward, I think that the department head should come to trustee meetings. Not every meeting, but schedule Diane comes to every third meeting just to give a report and, to ask things of us, and we can ask things of her, right? And then maybe Jenna's at the next one, and they don't have to be here for the whole thing. It's like a 10-minute, 15-minute slot. And Catherine's at one, so they can get the interaction too, and you can get more information and figure out how we can best help them without going through Sam as the filter, right? Otherwise, you're playing phone tag effectively, right? It's, so that type of thing I think would be helpful. And it's not meant to put them on the spot. It's meant to be a sharing of
Yeah.
information, right?
You know, what.
We're not quizzing them,
No,
right?
yeah.
We're,
They're not-
Well, but ultimately, it's our job to get more hours, and it's our job to go get more financing for their jobs and to go to the town to.
it's our job to support them, and if they're come and say what they need, we can better support them. Our staff is very creative on getting things done,
They are problem solvers.
and we should be able to do more to support them.
I think they're such good problem solvers sometimes that they do it without realizing there may be another way and they might get more support, financial, time, otherwise.
There's also an opportunity, I think this is one of the things we talked about. Just in terms of like the job description and also in anticipation, knowing we're gonna have some turnover, anticipating like what you want that job to be as opposed to like what it is now, too, right? Like maybe it's not gonna be when Diane's here, right? But whoever fills her position someday, like what role that is.
So
Yeah.
a lot of the job descriptions were written by the people saying, this is what I do,
Right.
rather than
Which is
this is what I
This is
should
what
be
we
doing.
need
Right.
for the library's
Right.
position.
And in reality, all of our librarians are jacks of all trades and they do everything. So
So like, one of the major things we need to do is the staff job description or position descriptions in the next year. And I would like to see a like 3-year projection to the best of our ability created. Or, like this triggers when the next person retires and then, like, just because what is, I think, hard is the advocacy role takes time. It takes time for us to connect with the person, to like advocate, thinking budget cycles, like you then have to meet with someone and think how much Mark did for us with the select board and FinCom. And when we came with our budget this year and said we need to add hours for these positions, get back the salaried, the benefited position, and then add this other one for 6 hours. So like, but it took hours of your work to get to that point that we got those roles. And if we are not preparing our budget early enough, and if we're not looking far enough ahead to see when the next big shift is that we need to set the groundwork for, we're not going to get it. We're not going to get our act together in time, or it would be frenzied and then we look like we're not prepared. So I think it's really important for us to the best of our ability, project forward. Like, this is the roles that we need filled to run this new library. And then this is how we're going to get there. We need more hours, or we need something else.
As the trustees, you have to there's a couple of trade-offs here you have to decide at some point, like, are you advocating to be open more hours and needing the staff for that? Or are you advocating that you need more hours, more staff hours for the hours that you're currently open? Or is there some
Hybrid
of those? I mean, would we like to say, instead of closing at 4, 3 days a week, we're going to close at 5, right? And what that would mean, and those go back to like, not just advocating for the library, but also listening to what people want, right? We had Sunday hours for 1 year or 2 years, many moons ago. And we've had people say that we want Sunday hours, so maybe figure out how to do that.
The one
Right,
thing you get
or-
done, Mark.
I know.
Mark, you failed.
Yeah, I know.
However,
Well, Sarah
that
can
was
pick
many
up.
moons ago,
No.
and we need to survey our patrons now to say, what are the hours that you want us open?
And one of the problems with the surveys is the people want you open 24/7, but that doesn't really mean that they'll be here then. So I mean, we changed our hours, so we're not open until 9 PM anymore. I don't know that hurt our numbers. If we changed it, if we were added an hour to make it 9, would that be effective, or would we be better off doing something else? Right, and those numbers are hard. They're like, you get those through experience more than anything else. I mean, there was complaints before that we should open earlier than 10, so that we open before people went to work. There were concerns that we weren't open. Well, at one point when we weren't opening till 1 o'clock, all the people at IBM couldn't come over on their lunch hours, for example, right? So we were trying to play the game with what hours made the most sense. And I think we came up with something that made sense, but I don't know if it's optimal or not. And if you were to add hours, I don't know where you'd necessarily add them on the beginning, the end, some days not, so. But that's something that the trustees need to work out. That's part of the I don't know what the long-range plans do again.
Not until fiscal year 26.
Oh, we got a while. Well, we have a while. I feel like some of this work is actually needing to be done ahead of time.
I'll take it next time.
Right, Sarah? Ready to be assigned. Everyone's gonna take a piece of Mark's brain.
But with the building being more or less complete, I mean, so much of the focus has been on the building for so many years that I think there's a lot of things that the library needs to give back to the community now for giving us the building, right? So that's on you guys. Good luck.
I do see those collaborations as a good first step. And I think also assessing how we are communicating with the public about what we're doing. Those communication channels have changed. So like no newspaper weekly printout of what's happening at the library. There's social media is not getting into people's hands anymore. We also have diversified the number of social media pages we have. So is it better to be one or multiple? There's a lot of components of that to think through and to play with. So we'll figure that out. But I do think, for example, when we're talking collaborations, if we have one initiated either by a trustee or another group to trustees or to Sam, I think it's important for us to figure out how to hand it off and then how it gets executed. That is your job, not ours, but with this school committee thing, meeting with administration and brainstorming where it is that we can be the most useful, supportive, and also how they can support us piece, then I do think needs to follow up with a presentation at school committee it's one thing with the administration, but it's another thing for board to board to say, look, this is our plan.
It feels, yeah, I mean, my preference ultimately, and Sam, what your goals would be like, I don't mind people going out and doing like the exploratory pieces, but ultimately like coming back to Sam or this table with Sam and making some really targeted goals around that, because if not, it just feels really sloppy.
Yeah.
So like I know this person has COA and I know this one over here and I had this conversation over here and we're doing this, but there's nothing strategic about it. So at the end of the day, we don't really know where we fostered versus, we have these three relationships and these programs that are in place and solid, and we want to double that number by the end of the year, or we want to have, yes, we've got a pollination program, but what do we actually have in place with conservation, and where do we want to go in the next 3 years? And so what are the steps to kind of get there, or how do we, it doesn't feel strategic. So I guess I would love to, keep exploring, and then
I do think keeping almost like a collaboration profile of like currently with conservation, we do twice a year storage walks and
who's
initiated by
in charge of that?
Diane, but which is great. And then in charge with the trust, the conservation trust people, and then they went and got the dates approved by a conservation committee. But again, that was a touch point that trustees missed, talking directly to Conservation Commission to just be a yearly touch-in kind of thing.
Right, and then again, longer term is so, and have we tagged the right people on social media when we're posting the pictures of it, and have we posted on the right pages about it, and if we put it up on the mom's page, and people walking or talking about it, and are we giving credit where credit's due, because if not, we're not really being a good friend about it either. So it feels very sloppy, and I think we're missing some of the touch points, and we're missing some of the follow through points that keep us a good neighbor. I think that's where I'd like to see goals, Sam. It just has it really strategic, so that it is following through and not just more backdoor handshakey.
The social media part, I'm not advocating one or another, but like the schools have that like Twitter feed going through, and the fire department, the police department have the Twitter feed of the events. The town website has like current events on, current news on there. We have a scroll bar of books, but there's really not the same thing of, this is what's coming up. The main page is much more stagnant, right? And having it easier to find what's coming up rather than having to go and check on the calendars and things would be I'm not saying whether it's Twitter.
There is.
We do.
Just make it a
Social
little
media
more,
tab.
Okay. It's below the
You're
fold.
talking
It's
about
below
the
the
Twitter
fold,
thing,
yes.
yeah.
I'm,
Yes.
I'm on Mark's page, like I
Yeah.
have such a hard time, and I think just because like I'm used to different sites and just like I won't do the extra clicks to find it. So I really know what's happening at the library. When Kimberly tells me like she's going to that, like,
So it is a good question of whether, so our website probably, I don't know how much flexibility we have to change our website.
Well, it's a town controlled.
Right.
So IT, I would have to talk to IT about it.
But maybe we do an assessment of what the current website, the pros and cons of the current website, and then see what it is we want to work with IT to change.
we have links embedded when we have the programs like out on Instagram or things like that. I think there are things, like, I don't think we need to problem solve into 9:30.
No, we can, have a 2 hour.
I was just saying, well, the social media, you have your own website, so make sure it's vibrant enough to, it's active enough to actually get. And I don't know, I'm not using holding up the town's website as an example, because it has plenty of other problems, but,
There's just so much space where nothing's happening.
yes.
But even like the format of our emails, things like that, that sometimes they get long and I don't even make it to the bottom. And then there's the children's one, like just,
Yeah.
let's just take stock of what we have. How many times is it opened? Like, what do we currently have and maintain? How many hours does that take to create and send? And then the same with social media, and then figure out where, and it could be that the YA crew needs to be on social media, but not social media we're currently posting on. And we're like where should we be targeting our time and energy and staff hours? And do we need volunteers to help us execute some of this, regular volunteer who would be committed to doing so? So lots of things to think about. So if in the next week you guys have ideas, it would be great if you wanted to shoot me emails of things you would like to see, whether or not they follow under these like buckets we kind of talked about.
Sam, do you have different ideas? Like when you're hearing us talk, are you like, no, because I want to go in a totally different direction, or things that we're not thinking about?
No, I think your ideas are good. I mean, I've been so focused on the building for the past 7 years that, I know we have to start in a new direction, and I have to start in a new mindset about how to approach the building. And we also have, like you said, we have staff that's going to be leaving soon, and we have new staff. So I think this is a perfect time to sort of go and examine what new ways we can go. So yeah.
Examine what we have, what's working,
Right.
and where
Right.
we need to improve. Yeah.
I think you said it really nicely earlier when we had the chance to meet with you, which I appreciated, that like you haven't had the opportunity to be a director in this building yet.
Right. Yeah. I feel like
Building
it's
manager and
right. I feel like I'm a politician or an architect more sometimes than a library director. And when I started here, I'd never been a director before. So it's been it's going to be a new learning experience being in this new library, and it sort of feels weird too at the same time. So I'm still getting used to it. And so I think these are great ideas. I think sometimes from myself and the staff, one pushback we would have is that we need time to sort of settle in.
And
And
that
it
is one of
seems
their
like,
feedback items.
right, it feels like, it's like, okay, we have this new building, but now you want us to do this. It's like, give us a little bit of space to sort of figure out the building first and figure out how things work. And yes, we're working on fixing things, but there's still stuff that needs to be fixed. And we still have to figure out, where we're going to hold Girl Scout meetings or, all that kind of stuff. So
I do think some of these things have to run in tandem, and we're at a point for some of these collaborations, like looking at summer reading, for an example, where the time frame is here. And we need to focus on that. The pollinator, like the pollinator thing is here, and we need to focus on that. And maybe some of the other collaborations we pause on and think through how we want to approach the groups before we layer them all on at once. And we are 6 against 1 here in terms of our ideas and
Well, there's a difference
energy.
between actively pursuing the groups and passively, when they come at you, figuring out how you want to
Right.
interact with them.
Yeah.
Some of them have to, like the schools and conservation, I think, are things that should be actively pursued.
I think the time to actively pursue is now for them.
And there's other things like this social media and the website, they're just like, they're more like tweaks that potentially more than like. And I'm pretty sure I can throw my wife under the bus. I'm more than happy to help with all that usability.
Yeah, that's our thing.
That's our thing.
And I appreciate what you're saying, Sam, because I would prefer to not move on a lot of these things until there's kind of a thoughtful plan for it. Like, so if you think about it, you've got a year when you commit to goals. Like if the first 3 months of it is really strategically planning and thinking it through and assigning people and, like setting benchmarks for it and looking at data you already have, it's like there was a talk earlier about looking at adult programming, specifically, like if we're taking a couple months first to look at how much do we have, what does participation numbers look like, what days and months are the most hit, what age range are we even talking about, what types of events, and kind of collating all that before we just start saying we have now more adult programming, but they're all attended by 5 people. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. So having a really thoughtful.
Yeah, are there age
targeted-
groups that we're missing? Are there times of days that we're
Right,
missing?
what are the accessibility needs?
Yeah.
Are we diverse enough? Are we hitting, are these all white events, or are we, hitting certain things? Are we taking into account the holiday calendar when we're scheduling that? Like, these are all things like I think by all means you should take a pause on. And I'd rather have a thoughtful plan and a vibrant calendar of that starting in January
Mhm.
than say, okay, I checked it off and now I just have it. You know what I mean? And I definitely feel like, the energy in the room being like, and then we can do this too. This will be really fun. Let's do all the things. And, and then we all go home and you're like, oh my God, right? So like, I don't want to leave that impression on.
I'm exhausted listening to us.
Yeah.
I can't imagine being exhausted.
Yeah, so I would really rather be thoughtful because there is so much data here and there's new data coming in. You don't have a ton of data in the new building yet. So I very much appreciate you saying that. I would absolutely support that piece of it. And if the pollinator thing can't happen, like the pollinator thing can't happen,
Yeah.
or if you need us to run that, then please tell us.
I mean, it's
to
one
run
thing
it.
if you say, in 2022, I can commit to doing a book display, and then let's look for the next program or whatever for in a year from now.
So I see it both ways here, and I can say because I'm a short timer, and short guys is a problem, but the librarians in general like things the way they are and are reluctant to change, and this is always going to be a change. So we have to push them. It's just a matter of how hard we push them, right? They can be happy settling into the next building for the next 5 years with nothing changing. So if you just sit back and wait for them to be ready, they'll never be ready.
Sure.
Right. So we need to initiate it, and they're going to be uncomfortable with some of the things, but you have to keep it to a comfortable, uncomfortable level, right? So sitting and waiting for them to be in the new building and ready. I mean, we've been in the new building for 6 months
6
now.
months.
So it's
It's time for us to look
start doing
forward.
this, and we don't have to run in all directions at once, but let's start moving somewhere, right? And pick where that is, but don't wait.
No, I don't disagree, but let's at least, to me, the part, and again, I'm newer in this, so I might be very wrong here, but it can feel like almost frenetic or like whack-a-mole. Like, here's a great idea, so now we have to do it right now, and then but there's not like a cohesive link to how that fits into a bigger vision or plan. And so that's just on the outside looking in. And that feels very different than the building project has. And I guess I would like it to feel more like the building project.
I agree with you that these collaborations should be one-offs. right? There should be a plan for an ongoing collaboration, but until you do a one-off,
Yeah, I agree.
it's hard to do a two-off,
Sure.
right? So,
I agree.
and you
I
don't
actually
have to
think
do a wide for all collaborating with everybody. You can go narrow with fewer ones, but you have to start moving on.
I think starting moving with schools and conservation makes complete sense, given the field, given our history with story walks, given our connection and need to, with schools, just makes sense. The children, YA, like all of that.
I'd really pour out of them every day, pour right up.
Yeah, like it feels like these two groups to start with now. And then let's learn from how we start these collaborations and relationships and apply it to the other groups going forward.
And it's not saying don't collaborate with the other groups. It's just you're not actively seeking out collaborations. If they organically appear,
Yes,
then
that
they
is.
appear, but you're not going to Park and Rec and Council on Aging and saying, we really want to do something with you
We're
now.
not
what can we
knocking
do?"
on all doors at
Right.
the same time.
Right.
Yeah. And that end, apparently we're adding LCTV to that.
It was your idea.
It was my idea, but I wasn't ready to act on it.
And I would encourage you to, or us, to partner with PTA at the schools. You know, that's a good collaboration. Especially in Shaker Lane and Russell Street.
Yeah, they're more active, right?
Right.
Cultural council.
I was gonna say, cultural council always seems to fund things that we end up getting programs for. So if there's, and you seem to have that channel, it would be great to know how that channel works. Maybe you can educate us before we see where that could go.
They just say, we have a cultural council grant. Do you want to do something? That's about it.
Yes,
Yes.
well, that one I would like to keep going because it's awesome.
Without throwing another one at you, when you're meeting with people about the Perkins School for the Blind, I include disabilities.
Yeah, that was actually,
in
did I say
here.
that to you today? Or you? I don't remember.
I'm not suggesting we have to do,
No, I
a
was,
lot with them, but when we have the disabilities.
once we know
We should figure
our
out-
equipment and the programming, I think that is a natural group to present to and see
Or
how
see
we
if there's
can.
special need. I mean, you have the funding, maybe they'll say get X versus Y. And it's good feedback to have before we spend the whole time.
Did we overwhelm you? Okay. I think. So the other thing we should talk about next month is the trustee budget, where we talked about the 3% a year to pull out and put in MMDT and say, this is our major buckets for putting the money in, and to use that to actually fund these grand schemes of ours.
I know you sent me an email that I read through. It was like, so it's on my list to read through and really try to understand.
So the trustees have a substantial trust that we aren't going to need as much of for the building as we originally thought. So the goal is to sustain and build that trust, but also use some of the proceeds. And things we've talked about was like the scholarships that we fund for the kids come out of the trust, right? You need to save some for, things that you're going to need in the building that you didn't originally plan for. Maybe you need more patio furniture or the extra shelves or things like that, right? That we also talked about, like, there's no budget for training for the staff. What else am I missing? Just that type of thing that until.
Programs.
And programs, right? Supplementing the programming budget, figure out what a reasonable allocation is. You don't have to figure out what you think you would like to spend in the coming year on each of those, right? And then figure out how to run with it going forward. So I'm sure I'm missing categories. I mean, you can come up with what you want.
I do. So I know that the last meeting we were trying to predict how much money do we need? We don't even know what we need. And maybe we should start this first year reversing that, saying, according to our financial people who advise us, pulling 3% out and saying, this is the max we can spend in a year. And then putting it in this much for scholarships, this much for building improvements, repairs, this much for training of staff, this much for programming or collaborations, and a slush fund in case something goes over or whatever, but breaking it out into 5 buckets or whatever. And just for the first year, seeing how we use it, how we track it, where we are coming up short, where we have extra, and maybe that will help guide us making that budget the other way that we traditionally think of making budgets going forward. Because I do think because we're starting literally fresh, we're not really sure what to expect, but by the time we start building these collaborations and relationships, then things will start coming, and we'll know that next year I need X amount for a program with conservation, or this much in the next fiscal year for X, Y, or Z, this much more for library things. So I think sometimes because we're such good problem solvers without a lot of money, we forget that we have money that we should be using and spending for the benefit of the library.
Yes, especially because that's how we got money from people who wanted us to spend it on the library. Not all at once, not all of it, but that was the purpose for it, not to just keep it in the bank.
And were we getting, I apologize if I get this wrong, were you giving us kind of a overall, like what you were expecting to need for some of the programming for that, or was that a completely separate line?
I think last month we talked about how it was going to need $4,000 for the rest of the year.
For the remainder of the fiscal year.
Right, for the 3% piece though, like we were talking about that, or are we saying we don't care? We're just
I
gonna
do
work
think
within the
part of
3%?
it would be helpful maybe to know how much we spent in programming
Oh, sure.
in the last fiscal year and how much of that came out of state aid, town budget,
Friends.
friends, and
Yeah.
trustees funds or whatever else.
I think especially the trustees fund, I think that was the
The
piece that,
big piece.
Yeah,
So, because I do
exactly.
think that will help us tell us how big that bucket needs to be.
I think, yeah, at least that gave us some guide, some bumper rails.
Mhm.
That's what we were talking about, okay.
So the other thing is I have no idea how much is sitting in the state aid account anymore, right? Which is, and how much we've allocated for different things for the upcoming budget. So that might be something you keep track of as well. Because I mean, the state aid is money that you get back every year from the state of 14,000 or something.
17,000.
17,000. But some of it is in the budget and some of it is not. At one point, we were going with the school model where you'll spend the state aid that you got in fiscal year 2021 and the fiscal year 2022 budget, right? So you always knew exactly how much you could budget.
You know the bucket.
But I don't know that we have been doing that
Right, because we
regularly.
get $17,000 a year, but we get half in the first part of the year and the second half in another part of the year. So it's in here.
Well, that's how much that doesn't actually have the account balance, right? It says you,
So right now there's $15,790 left in it.
And stated.
Yeah.
Left.
Right.
and we still get another check.
That's with,
See these numbers, I'm just having trouble saying the numbers, but anyway, it's something to keep track of how you want to allocate that money.
We should use them that wisely. Yes.
Mini golf. You have to have mini golf.
I see that under advocacy. But we also need a fundraising. I mean, we can be putting it in trust for future things, but how we sell it to.
I agree that mini golf is a big advocacy thing that has to happen going forward. And the fact that you can raise money doing it is just an extra benefit. But it's an advocacy thing. And that's actually when you need to have a plan on how you're going to reach out to all the other groups, so that they can have posters or things.
Yeah, you could have a table, you could have whatever.
And we didn't really do a good job of that before, but we also weren't using mini golf as an advocacy tool.
We totally were using it as an advocacy,
Not for all the other groups.
I move.
not for the other groups, that's true. Before you move, I think we should not close the meeting just because otherwise Mark's done. Thank you for for your years of service and setting us up for this.
That's fine. Just don't blame Amy. I
I
don't know that Amy's the one that made me join, but I'm pretty sure she gave me my name.
It sounds like
She
it.
denies it.
No,
What
it's
year's Mark, 16?
16 years.
16.
I had to stay long enough to be on longer than Cheryl. But then I looked and I think she was only on for 13 years, so I could have put a couple years in.
No, you couldn't have.
So you have a new building, use it wisely.
Yeah,
I'm not going anywhere.
you're not going to be allowed to go anywhere. We need to keep picking your brain. However, you do have to stop executing on the ideas you have. Please. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I'm annoyed at you, Mark, because now I'm the senior person and I'm not sure I'm qualified.
All right.
That's okay.
Next month, you also have to decide the calendar, and is that usually the next month after?
So in June, you do the calendar, you have to elect officers, you have to
Like the
decide
officers?
how many signatures you need on the budget, on all the forms.
Yeah.
Someone's got to take over for signing the bills for me starting next week.
Wants
Chris
to
and
take
I are doing
over.
it now.
I'm at the library like every day. I can sign.
Okay.
They're-
Well,
He
they're
wants to
electronic.
just sign Mark's bill. End
Yeah,
of the
they're just
bills.
DocuSign.
Yeah, I can just tell Susan to pick somebody else.
I actually miss the old, what, I liked it better.
When you actually
the old
sign
one
it.
when you actually sign it. It's much
Yeah.
easier to review them.
And sometimes it doesn't fill all the way.
Yes, if you try to read the thing too fast, it
Yeah.
it just hangs. The DocuSign doesn't keep up with the cursor.
All right. You will keep us in line of what we need to do next month. When we forget.
Godspeed.
I know, Sam, I'm sorry. I can't tell if this is a good thing for you or a bad thing.
Chris, Sam has seniority over you.
That's great.
Sorry, you have to deal with me now.
He deserves it. I wish that I'm all done personally. The meeting is too. Wendy started a movement.
I'll second it.
Okay, Mark.
I didn't know if Mark wanted to move to this meeting last time. All right, all in favor? Aye. Next meeting is June, whatever that first Thursday is.